There are writers who tell stories, and then there are writers who change what a country believes about itself. Tom Clancy never served in the military. He never held a security clearance. And yet his first novel made senior officials wonder if he knew too much. But somehow, an insurance salesman from Maryland wrote a book that was so technically convincing that the most powerful people in the American government read it like it was a briefing. Welcome to Stories in the Seventh State. This is a story about Tom Clancy, but not as a list of books, more of a Maryland-made force of culture. A man who turned complexity into narrative. A man who made submarines, satellites, analysts, and presidents feel like characters you could understand. And whether you love him or hate him, a man who taught millions of people, often without them realizing it, how to think about power. Tom Clancy was born in Baltimore in 1947. He's a middle-class kid from a Catholic family, Baltimore City kid. And early on, he was obsessed with military history and systems, the mechanics of conflict, the logic of strategy. He wasn't a kid reading comic books and pulp fiction. He was the kid skipping past children's stories and reaching for naval history, war accounts, technical details. That might sound like a throwaway detail, but it does matter, because it tells you what Clancy was doing from the start. He wasn't escaping reality, he was learning it, cataloging it, turning it into a mental map. He attended Loyola College in Baltimore. He studied English, so yeah, he could write. But in his mind, the next step was obvious. He wanted the military. He joined ROTC. And that's where the first twist happens. And here's where the first twist happens. He gets rejected. Not because he isn't committed, not because he can't do the work, but because he is extremely nearsighted. So nearsighted that his signature thick glasses became part of his identity later. For a lot of people, that's where the story ends. I couldn't serve, so I became a writer. But that's too neat. The deeper reality is that rejection didn't remove the military from his life. It just changed how he'd participate in it. Because if he can't join the system, you study the system. And Tom Clancy studied systems like a man trying to earn a commission he was never given. After college, he becomes an insurance salesman in Maryland, Calvert County, to be exact. It's a practical job. It's a pretty normal job. But he's surrounded by people in and around the Navy world. Submariners, contractors, defense-adjacent workers. And that's when you start to see the Clancy pattern. He starts collecting information. Tom collects information the way that other people collect souvenirs. Not secrets, not classified documents, just open source knowledge, technical manuals, first-hand experiences, professional journals. He's building a library in his mind. And more importantly, he's building a worldview. Insurance, for those that know it, understand it's a business of risk. Insurance is what can go wrong, how likely is it, and what happens next. That's also not a random footnote. That's the skeleton of a Tom Clancy plot. Because in Clancy's books, the drama is rarely, who can punch harder? The drama is, what's the cascading failure if this goes wrong? What happens if an alarm triggers? What happens if a radar signal gets misread? What happens if leadership makes the wrong decision under pressure? This is a systems thinker's imagination. And somewhere in all that, while selling policies during the day, He starts writing a novel at night. It's a story about a Soviet submarine captain who wants to defect and brings with him the kind of technological advancement that could shift the balance of global power. That book becomes The Hunt for Red October. Now, I know many of you have probably heard of that book. Some of you have probably read it. Some of you have probably seen the movie. Clancy doesn't send it to a big New York publisher. He sends it first to the U.S. Naval Institute Press in Annapolis. It's a serious institution. It's known for naval nonfiction. They'd never published a novel before. And when their people read this manuscript, they didn't just ask, is it good? They asked themselves, is it safe to publish? Because the detail is that convincing. And Clancy, the insurance salesman, becomes the guy who makes a military publisher gamble on fiction. That's the beginning. But the thing that happens next is the part that feels like a movie. So when The Hunt for Red October comes out, it's 1984. It's not an overnight blockbuster at first. It's a success, yes. But the explosion comes when the book lands in the hands of the First Lady. Nancy Reagan gets it from a friend. She reads it, or at least sees enough to know it's the kind of thing that Ronald Reagan would love, so she gives it to the president. And Ronald Reagan, former actor, storyteller, Cold War leader, he reads it and reportedly calls it his kind of yarn. How about that for a throwback? Think about what that means, though. The President of the United States publicly endorses a debut novel published by a naval press. The endorsement turns a strong book into a cultural event. You got to remember, this is before social media. Having an endorsement like that meant the world. The book shoots up the charts. Clancy goes from selling insurance in Maryland to being invited to the highest rooms of power. And he's not just being celebrated as a writer. He's being studied as a phenomenon. Because officials in the military and the intelligence world are reading this thinking, how does he know this? And Clancy later, he would tell stories about meeting Navy leadership and being asked point blank, who cleared this? His answer is essentially, no one. I just got it from open sources and careful research. Here's what's important about this moment. Clancy didn't just write a successful book. He demonstrated something that would only become more and more true over time. That you can build an incredibly accurate picture of military capability and strategy without access to classified information. This is open source intelligence before it becomes a mainstream concept. And it's also why Clancy is so compelling. He doesn't ask the reader to suspend disbelief. He makes the disbelief feel almost embarrassing. You read Clancy and you think, I don't know this world. I didn't know that this world worked like that. And then you start believing that it does. And that's the first real power of Clancy. He makes complexity feel understandable. He makes the invisible visible. But then he does something even bigger. He makes power feel moral. Tom Clancy's stories have a signature shape to them. They're not about lone wolves. They're not about chaos heroes. They're really about systems. And in Clancy's world, systems work when good people lead them. That's his doctrine. So, we'll break it down for you. Principle 1. Systems beat heroes. Yeah, he's got heroes in his books. He certainly does. But what he's really doing is showing you a machine. The CIA analyst doing the desk work, the Navy crew executing orders, the pilot reading the instrumentation, the political leadership making the call. He shows the chain. He shows the procedure. He shows how an institution behaves under pressure. That's why military people respected him. Because even when the plot's wild, the process feels right. Principle 2, competence is moral. So in Clancy's world, competence isn't just a skill. It's character. The good guys don't win because they're lucky. They win because they prepare, they're disciplined, and they act with purpose. The bad guys lose because they're arrogant, they're sloppy, they're corrupt, or fanatical. This is a worldview where doing your job well is not just practical, it's righteous. And that's where Jack Ryan enters. So many of you have probably seen the Amazon series. You've probably seen some of the movies that were made in the 80s and 90s with our boy Harrison Ford, hot dog. Jack Ryan isn't introduced as some super soldier. He's an analyst. He's a thinker. He's a man who tries to understand the world. And Clancy uses Ryan to deliver a fantasy that a lot of people secretly want. What if the person in charge wasn't the loudest? What if the person in charge was just the most competent? And Jack Ryan becomes the vessel for that. So we'll go to principle 3, America as a thinking power. Clancy doesn't portray America as powerful because it's brutal. He portrays America as powerful because it's smart, because it's got technology, it's got analysts, it's got logistics. It has institutional memory. That's why his stories hit so hard in the late Cold War era, because the public didn't really understand nuclear strategy or intelligence work. Clancy translated it into a story that you could feel. He didn't just create entertainment. He created a language that once you learned, you started to see the real world through it. So when something happens, an international crisis, a covert op, a hostage rescue, people would say, that kind of seems like a Clancy novel. And that's the evidence of imprint. But Clancy didn't stop at writing novels because he realized something that most authors never even consider. Stories don't just entertain, they train intuition. And that is where the empire begins. So by the 1990s, Tom Clancy, he's not just a best-selling author. By this point, he's a brand. Hollywood adapts his books, you got big stars, big budgets, and his name becomes a SEAL. Not a Navy SEAL, but you get my drift. But the most underrated part of the Clancy empire, really, it's not the movies. It's the video games. So in the late 90s, Clancy co-founds Red Storm Entertainment, and they release Rainbow Six. And Rainbow Six changes the way that people experience military storytelling. Most shooters at the time are run-and-gun fantasies. But Rainbow Six, the video game, says, no, you're going to plan, you're going to coordinate, you're going to move slowly, and one mistake can get you killed. It's the first of its kind. It's pretty unique in that respect. So it doesn't just feel like a game, it feels like one of his novels, except you're inside of it and you get to control the character. And then it spreads. So you get, off of that Rainbow Six, you get video games like Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell, later The Division. Clancy's worldview gets turned into interactive muscle memory. I mean, that's crazy. You're not just reading about tactics, you're practicing them. And here's the crucial business move. Ubisoft eventually buys perpetual rights to the Tom Clancy name for the games. That's a historical moment in the entertainment business. An author's name becomes an owned franchise label, like a studio. Tom Clancy becomes not just a person, but a prefix. Tom Clancy's become a promise. It means that you're going to get tactical realism, you're going to get global stakes, and you're going to get competence under pressure. And this is why his influence is hard to measure, because his work isn't just consumed, it's repeated, it's played, it becomes habit. Millions of people, many of whom have most likely never read a Clancy novel, still absorb his worldview through the games. They learn that the world is full of threats, that safety requires secret professionals, that the best outcomes come from disciplined expertise and moral certainty. That's not politics. That's narrative conditioning. Now, if you love Clancy, you're going to say, he honored professionalism. He respected the military. He celebrated competence. If you hate Clancy, you're going to say, he normalized a fantasy where American power is always righteous and always clean, and I know that's not true. And that leads us to the part of the story that you can't skip. Criticism. The same thing that made Clancy a phenomenon is the same thing that made him a target. Because in America, the only thing we like more than building somebody up is tearing them down. So, because Clancy's got this moral universe, and it's not really subtle, his heroes are these straight arrow patriots. His villains are often unambiguous threats. And critics said, that's not realism. That's ideology. Some argued that Clancy, he really couldn't write humans the way that he could write hardware, and that he could explain a submarine better than a soul. Others argued that his worldview was just too clean, too might makes right, too convinced that the U.S. intervention is inherently benevolent. And there's a deeper critique that matters, especially now. Clancy's stories often imply that democracy is messy and that the security professionals should be trusted to handle the real work off stage. In other words, let the experts run the world. Don't ask too many questions. Forgive the mistakes because the mission is bigger. And that idea used to be accepted. It no longer is. Whether you agree with it or not, it became more and more controversial after the 9/11 era. Because after 9/11, the U.S. enters into these long wars. The simplicity of, we can solve this with competence, really collides at the reality of insurgencies and unintended consequences and civilian suffering, political chaos and moral ambiguity. I don't think anybody is going to look at the last 20 years, 25 years and say that everything that we do as Americans is perfect. And Clancy's worldview assumes that maybe it is. His view assumes that competence wins, and and we know that that is not the case. But history showed something colder. Competence is not a guarantee. And even competent actions can create new problems. That doesn't mean Clancy was wrong, certainly not at the time that he wrote these things. It means that he was building a particular kind of story, a story where the system works if the right people are in charge. And as we know in the real world, systems are often filled with competing incentives, imperfect information, and human failure. That gap between the Clancy world and the real world is where his legacy gets a little complicated. But even if you accept every criticism, you can't deny the man's cultural impact. Because Clancy didn't just write in a moment, he became the moment. And even after his death, the Clancy machine kept moving. Tom Clancy passed away in 2013, but the name Tom Clancy certainly does not. The books kept coming, written by collaborators and successor authors under the Clancy banner. The games kept evolving, especially Rainbow Six Siege, which became a global phenomenon. And Jack Ryan's getting rebooted into a major streaming series, bringing Clancy's hero archetype into the new era. Thank you, what's his face from The Office? Oh my God, John Krasinski. Thank you, John Krasinski. Not exactly who I would have picked for an action star, but to each his own. What's interesting is how the post-Clancy era tries to update the brand without breaking it. Because the Clancy name still means something specific. It means serious. It means tactical authenticity. It means a world of threats met by skilled professionals. But modern audiences, they kind of demand a little bit more nuance, a little bit more diversity, a little more self-awareness. And so the Clancyverse stretches. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it feels like a suit that really doesn't fit anymore. But You can see Ubisoft learning this in real time. The Clancy name can't just be slapped on anything without fan backlash because the brand promise is heavy. It means you're going to get his worldview. And that worldview of competence, order, righteous action, it does still have an audience, especially now, because it is ideal. And right now, I think we live in a world where people feel overwhelmed by complexity, where institutions feel unstable, where truth feels slippery. Clancy offered the opposite. He offered structure. He made the chaos of geopolitics feel like a problem that could be solved if the right people did their jobs. And that is why he still matters. Not because he predicted the future, but because he trained people to interpret it. Tom Clancy, he's a unique American story, but he's also a uniquely Maryland story. We're talking about a Baltimore kid, Loyola student, an Annapolis publisher taking a risk, a Chesapeake region life that becomes a global cultural force. And when you zoom out, you realize what Clancy really did. He built a bridge between the public and the hidden architecture of power. He made intelligence work legible. He made military strategy understandable. He made systems feel like characters. And then through movies, through games, through that Clancy label becoming an empire, he made that worldview ubiquitous. And here's the final twist. Tom Clancy's greatest talent wasn't knowledge of weapons. It was knowledge of how people wanted the world to look. People want competence to win. People want good intentions to matter. People want the system to be worthy of trust. Clancy wrote that world into being again and again until it felt real. And that's the legacy. Because even if the real world doesn't behave like a Clancy novel, once you've learned his language, you can never stop hearing that sonar ping. Tom Clancy didn't predict the future. He taught America how to imagine power. And once you imagine it in that way, it changes what you demand from your leaders, what you expect from your institutions, and what you believe is possible. This has been Stories in the Seventh State. In this episode, we're paying respects to the Maryland boy, the man that made a name for himself that'll stick with us forever. Until next time, I'm Shane Hall, and this was Stories in the Seventh State.